The president is asking for less authority than he has today under previous authorizations. I don't think that's smart. We need a robust strategy to take on ISIL. No one has seen one from this White House yet. In addition to a robust strategy, I think we need to have a robust authorization. And I don't believe that what the president sent here gives him the flexibility or the authority to take on this enemy and to win.
House Speaker John Boehner saying President Obama's plan to fight ISIS isn't too smart. With Miranda Khan, welcome into Hour 2 of America's Forum. Joining us now, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra, and the former interim minister of the Interior of Iraq and former New York Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik. We thank you both, gentlemen, Skyping in here today. Bernie, is the president's request for military force against ISIS too restrictive?
Personally, I think it is. I think there can't be time limits. That's most important. You know, these guys, all these groups, whether it's ISIS or Al Qaeda or any of the others, you know, they look at something like this and they say, you know, it's restricted by 3 years. You know, we can wait. They have enormous patience. We've seen this dating back from the mid-90s, early 90s, right on into 2014. They just wait us out. There shouldn't be restrictions. This is a war, and they're going to kill us if we don't kill them. And I think, you know, war is war. We have to go to battle and do it right. And you can't do that with restrictions as they have in this bill.
Pete, do you think it will get congressional approval?
I'm very suspect as whether it will get congressional approval. You know, they do want something much more robust. At least the Republicans do want something like that. I think the key thing here, it's not whether the resolution is robust, it's whether the president's actions have been robust enough. Take a look at this list. You know, and these are the trend lines. Things are getting worse in Yemen, they're getting worse in Libya, they're getting worse in Nigeria, in Chad. The Kurds are the only ones really holding their own. The Sunnis are losing ground in Iraq, and it appears that we're losing ground in Afghanistan. The bottom line is all the trend lines in the battle against ISIS are going in the wrong direction.
Well, as you offer that visual aid, the White House got some aid yesterday, as you might expect, from the current Chief of Staff, Dennis McDonough. He defended the president's plan. Let's take a listen. I'm sorry, apparently we don't have that available. He is suggesting taking issue with what appears to be, Bernie, where he sets up a straw man. The Chief of Staff says, and I quote, "We had some suggest maybe we ought to go back to kind of a full-scale invasion we saw in Iraq. This is a mistake." Bernie, I don't know that anybody's suggesting that kind of full-scale invasion. Isn't there a plan afoot that would be kind of back to the future, if you will? The success we had in the early days in Afghanistan with limited forces hitting targets to back up air support. Isn't that really what a lot of people want to see?
Well, I think that's what a lot of people want to see, but I don't think there's a strategy or a plan in place. And I think that is the Republican concern. We also have something now that we didn't have in the past, and that's some real movement on the Arab side with the King of Jordan, with the President of Egypt, with the Emirates supporting Jordan. We've got a lot of movement now that we didn't have in the past that we really need to be using. We need to make sure that these guys are getting the resources they need. You know, for years we said we want to get the Muslims involved, the Muslim countries involved, the Arab countries, the Gulf states, and they weren't too involved. Now you have them heavily involved, at least 2 or 3 of them. We need to get them the support they need and get them the resources they need, give them the backing they need to go in there and do this, because they can be an extremely helpful ally and resource.
Pete, do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Bernie's right. You've got 3 groups who are willing to put the boots on the ground if we're willing to give them the military equipment and training that they need. The Kurds, the Sunni tribes in Iraq, and the good guys in Libya. And then you've got the Jordanians, the UAE, and the Egyptians who have the military capability to support the boots on the ground that the Kurds, the Sunnis, and the Libyans would the Kurds, the Sunnis, and Libyans, they'll put the boots on the ground. This is a making of a very effective coalition. But what are we doing? We're not arming the Kurds, the Sunnis, or the Libyans, and we're pushing the Egyptians to the Russians. It's absolutely crazy.
And we should note that Vladimir Putin was in Egypt just last week, even as Egypt now has launched those airstrikes against ISIS for killing the Coptic Christians. Listen, a lot to talk about. So Bernie and Pete, we're going to ask you to stay right there. And wherever you're watching us, we hope you'll stay put too, as America's Forum continues right after this time out on Newsmax TV.
I want ISIS to think that we're going to use 1 million troops, we're going to stay there 100 years, and we're going to use every weapon. And then the president decides what he's going to do. But put the fear of God in those people, and also keep them that they have to be defending themselves everywhere, that they have to assume every possible contingency. Don't tell them in advance what you're going to do or not do.
Peter King, the congressman from New York, calling for strategic ambiguity, but the ultimate goal not being very ambiguous, trying to really put fear into ISIS. Let's continue our conversation now with former Congressman Pete Hoekstra and the former New York Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik, both gentlemen Skyping in, Pete from Michigan and Bernie from New Jersey. Strategic ambiguity. Pete, it has its place. Is there a danger with the authorization of the use of military force that we will telegraph our punches, so to speak?
I don't think so. I think whatever the president gets or doesn't get, remember, he's got more authority right now than what he's asking for. So if nothing passes, I think we're just fine, except the bad guys will see us as being divided. The action here is a conviction by the president that he is going to use the tools necessary, as Peter would say, to put the fear into ISIS. They just don't see it. They've watched us lose Yemen. They're watching, and as we lose Nigeria and that expands into Chad, they're successful in Libya. They're not afraid of us. They continue to expand the fields where they're playing and gaining the initiative.
Bernie, since you were the former interim interior minister in Iraq during the days of our significant presence there, there was a very disturbing development over the weekend where ISIS almost overran a base with a whole lot of Americans. They were unsuccessful, but how vulnerable are Americans now in Iraq?
Americans all over the world, realistically, are vulnerable, especially in softer targets. But in Iraq, we've seen things like this happen in the past, but in a circumstance like which we had recently, you have to wonder where the resources are. You have to wonder where the reinforcements are. And they're just not getting to where they're supposed to be the way it's being told by Washington. We have to do more. And like I said, I don't think I can't put more emphasis on backing and supporting Jordan and Egypt and the Emirates. Look, you have the King of Jordan, who was the commander of special forces before he ever became the king in 1999. El-Sisi, the president of Egypt, was their commander-in-chief of the military. These guys know the enemy. They have incredible intelligence services. They can get into places that we can't, but they need resources to do it. And I strongly urge Congress and the president to push for those resources.
A couple of minutes remain. Peter Hoekstra, you and I spent a good bit of our years in Congress, and of course, we're up for election every 2 years. There's another election campaign going on, not in the United States, but in Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has a new campaign ad featuring ISIS asking for directions to Jerusalem. Our viewers are seeing a portion of it right now. This ad is saying that the left in Israel would give in to terror. Pete, in your estimation, I know there's no election right now, but would that ad have a special resonance right now in the United States?
Oh, I think it would have a resonance. Again, if you looked at the map, take a look where ISIS is active. Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, the Sinai Peninsula, they are surrounding they are surrounding Israel. and positioning themselves to really be a serious threat to the nation state of Israel. And obviously, Israel is our strongest ally in the Middle East. If we see Israel threatened, we will rally behind the candidate that has in their platform an agenda to protect and partner with Israel.
Before we get to any type of political campaign, Bernie Kerik, you have long warned of possible terror attacks in the United States. With the minute that remains, your background, what does your gut tell you right now? Are we very susceptible? Do you expect an attack in the not too distant future?
Yeah, I've said this consistently. I do. We're going to see things like that happened in Denmark. We're going to see things that happened in Paris. The people that are abroad right now holding American passports, I anticipate at some point they will get back into this country. And if our intelligence capabilities, assets, can't pick them up, monitor, or grab them in some way, they're not coming back to work in a McDonald's. They're going to do exactly what they were doing abroad, decapitating people, mass slaughtering innocent children, women, and men. That's what I foresee. And we don't need 4 planes flying into buildings like we did on September 11th to create an economic nightmare for this country.
And we will have to leave it there. Bernie Kerik, we thank you for your time. Pete Hoekstra, we'll see you again in about an hour. And I hope to see you following this break as America's Forum continues.